Hi, my name's Ian and welcome back to my channel, and I'm just going to do a quick off the cuff, well, see how quick it ends up being, but an ad hoc game review of Black Sword Hack Ultimate Chaos Edition. This is built on the Black Hack game. That's an OSR game that's really rules light, uses a lot of interpretation by the games master to do it, so there's no sort of complex, overly weird class mechanics or anything else. The Black Sword Hack is an iteration of the Black Hack that has a sort of specific themes in mind and some very nice mechanics that I think are very useful beyond this particular game in question. So the rules itself, very slimline rule set, not very much there. You're talking 108 pages in total, which is actually smaller than the Black Hack itself. But we'll go through it. The illustrations, by the way, the pictures are absolutely brilliant. Just as a general, before we delve into the rules, just to give you an overview of the general theme of the game. So, as you might tell by the Black Sword Hack, it follows very much the sort of line of Moorcock and so on, about that ultimate destructive cosmic battle between law and chaos, and how that affects particular game worlds and the balance between them as that becomes a bit more unbalanced, shall we say, and the sides that characters take in that cosmic conflict and how that affects the world and what goes through. There's an interesting bit at the back. So the thing at here. Before the rings had a lord, and you know that's in reference to fantasy had other heroes, thieves, gladiators, kings. Law and chaos were battling over human souls, and heroes rose and fell. Build a world, watch it burn. That might give you some indication of the themes of this. It's very much, if you've ever read the novel Stormbringer, where the war between chaos, basically, as the novel goes on, gets worse and worse, and the entire world of Elric is trashed and comes to an end. That's the sort of epic storytelling that these very slimline set of rules are channeling you to tell. Right. So, like I said, the illustrations are absolutely brilliant. It's liberally scattered with quotes from the likes of Moorcock. And who's that? Yes, we know who that is. Okay, so the things are really simple, and people that play Dungeons and Dragons will recognise a lot of these things. You've effectively got attribute checks, ability checks, skill checks, whatever. You've got a critical success and failure mechanism. You've got advantage and disadvantage, all of that kind of stuff. It uses the Black Hack process of abstracting distances and time. So you've got close, nearby, far away, and distant as distance components, and it codifies it into meters and squares, 5 foot squares. It uses metric pretty much throughout because it's a French publication, I believe. The usage die, I think this mechanic can be brought into any role-playing game that you like, unless you're looking for an absolute realistic measurement of resources. So in something like Twilight 2000, for example, which is very much about managing resources and looking after what you've got and using things sparingly, it's probably a better idea to track ammunition and fuel and whatnot very carefully and very specifically, because the theme of the game is trying to make sure that you've got enough stuff to carry on doing what you need to be doing. However, in Dungeons and Dragons, which uses abstract combat mechanics and all of that kind of thing, it's always been a bit mystifying why then you have to go and specifically record the number of arrows you've got. And I think usage actually, the usage mechanic it comes from Black Hack, and it's here as well, is absolutely perfect for it. And the general idea is you set a die size, 20, 12, 10, 8, 6 or 4, to a particular resource, compared on the general size of that resource. So if it's a larger size, so you've got a huge quiver, right? You might set a 20-sided dice for your resource die. A medium-sized quiver, you might set a D12 or a D10 or something along those lines, right? So you're not counting, you're not crossing off your shots as you go. What you're doing is every time you use it, or at the end of combat or what have you, then you'll go and roll your usage die to see how many arrows you've got. And if we're starting off with a D12, let's say, if that D12 comes up as a 1 or 2, then your usage die shifts down to a D10. And if that comes up a 1 or 2 after the next combat, it shifts down to a D8, and so on until you get to D4. And if it comes up as a 1 or 2 on a D4, then you've run out. Nice thing about that is it also takes into account not just your usage, but it reflects how many arrows that you can get back. Obviously, after a combat, an archer is going to be around retrieving arrows that can be retrieved for use again. Because arrows ain't cheap, regardless of what the player's handbook says. So usage die is a really good thing, and it uses usage in all sorts of ways within this particular set of rules. For example, in the Doom mechanic. So the Doom mechanic is a usage die, and when it's run out, your character has brought doom upon themselves. So there are various mechanics throughout the course of the game. So if you use a particular special ability, or you get a critical failure in a test or anything like that, then you have to make a doom roll. If you make a doom roll, that's like using the usage dice roll. So you roll your usage die. If it comes up 1 or 2, then it goes down a die, and so on. And then ultimately, if your doom die goes down to a 4-sided dice and you roll a 1 or 2 on that, then you have brought doom upon yourself. And you can do other things as well. So you can call upon doom. So you roll a doom die and then you subtract the result from an attribute test, right? The doom die is automatically downgraded when you do that. And once your doom die is depleted, the character is considered doomed. All of their attribute tests and damage rolls are made with disadvantage until you can make a long rest. Right, so combat is pretty much as we, you're rolling. In this, it's all very much proactive on the players to do stuff, right? So it's not like during the DM has a turn to roll the attack of the monsters, and then the players get to roll the attacks for their characters. What happens is during the players' go, they get to roll an attack against the monsters, the opponents, and then when it's the monster's turn to attack, it's the players that choose how they're going to defend against that attack, either by parrying or dodging, and they get to roll to see if they've managed to avoid the attack. So there's rules about how opponents go about doing that, and modifiers and everything else to go through it, but it's basically the players are the ones that are rolling these things, and it's their ability to attack that matters, it's their ability to defend that matters. So the focus is very much on the characters as the heroes of the story, rather than just part of the whole sort of combat things. And in that way, it doesn't sort of then break down into a skirmish game like Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is effectively these days is a miniature skirmish game that has some role-playing elements laid upon it. This is very much still within the bounds of role-playing and of player proactivity. So there are certain. So that's it really. Combat is 1, 2, 3, 3 pages, of which the third page is mostly an example of how it runs. Then we've got character creation. You've got similar ability scores to everywhere else. You've got strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom and charisma. There you go, no surprise there. The way you actually generate the scores is by rolling 2d6, and you use this table here. So the if you roll a 2, for example, the actual value that you assign to an ability score is 8. So all of your ability scores range between 8 and 13. So it means that you've got a more than average character at the end of the day. Then you go for origins. So here we've got barbarian, civilized and decadent origins. And then you have backgrounds, which in this case, for barbarian origin, for example, we've got berserker, chieftain, herbalist, hunter, raider, whatever. So instead of classes, you have this combination between your origin and your background. Right? You choose 3 backgrounds. It says 2 have to be within the bounds of your origin, and then another one can be from anywhere. Right? There are some of the backgrounds, for example, assassin. It means that you cannot take 2 backgrounds described as unique. So if you take assassin, you cannot take inventor. That's as simple as that. And then everything else is generated. So hit points comes from constitution. Doom, you start with a d6. You'll start with a d6 weapon damage and d4 unarmed damage, and then you get some starting equipment, some coins based on your origin, and then off you go. Language chart, it specifically has this from a language chart which is reminiscent of more of Conan than anything else, but I would suggest if you're going to do a world, I mean, there's lots of stuff in here about building worlds and everything else, because I think it's assumed that every time you start a campaign with it, you're starting a new world that is doomed. So, yeah, an example list there, but you can then go and create your own languages for it. Equipment and everything else, there's just much of a muchness about what things do and how much things cost. Experience. Then effectively every time a character survives an adventure, you gain a story. You write down the title of the adventure on your character sheet, and then once you have a number of stories equal to your current level, then you gain a level. So first level, if you gain a story, you're then second level. Once you've got 2 stories in your bag, or 2 adventures in your bag as a second level character, then you go to third level, and so on. Levels go up to 10. Your level benefits is basically you gain more hit points, gain gifts, which are described here, and your doom die increases and your attributes increase. So there's no huge amount of strange and wonderful special abilities and so on. These gifts are based on what your allegiance is to balance, chaos, or law. I think you can take from whichever column you like, but as the campaign goes on and the conflict between law and chaos intensifies, then it becomes a bit more pertinent as to what you have chosen from what columns. So dark pacts and so on. This starts going into demonic pacts, spirit alliances, and sorcery and chucking spells around. So chucking spells around is not without cost in this game. It's assumed that magic has a cost in your humanity. These are also tied to specific classes as well. So demonic pacts are tied to the when I say classes, right? So demonic pacts are assigned to the warlock background. Spirit alliances are assigned to the shaman background. Sorcery is assigned to the forbidden knowledge background. Fairy ties, the changeling background. Twisted science, the inventor background. Runic weapons. So this goes into putting Stormbringer together effectively. So you've got a type of weapon, a bunch of tables that describe what the weapon can do and what its form is, and then some monsters, some antagonists. It says antagonists are presented as follows. No, whatever, that's the statistics, but they're really kind of tiny statistics. Let's have a look. Let's find one. So, desiccated dragon. Here you go. Level 10 monster. Bit of a description of it. Then it has a something that inflicts damage, gas or dex, a wing flap, which you fall on your ass, no move next turn. Suggestion, so it attacks a close ally. You attack a close ally from this, and it's got resistance to mundane weapons. So very tiny amount of statistics. As you can see, there's lots of, so all of this. You've got all of the giant animals and golems and snake people and everything else, right? So it's got, what do you find on the corpse? There's a similar table in the Black Hack, but this basically says it's a game about taking part in the conflict between law and chaos, and looting corpses shouldn't become a habit. On most humanoid characters you'll find some kind of, so it kind of reiterates that, but puts the what you find on a corpse mechanism of the Black Hack within to the theme of the Black Sword Hack. Then that's pretty much, that's the rules for playing the game. The player's handbook, if you like, all 58 odd pages of it. And then we get into world creation. So a lot of these are, tables that you can roll on and everything else. The way that it manages the struggle between law and chaos itself is, again, by usage dice. So where I say about usage die is all over in this game, that mechanic, it builds it into this as well. So you've got you've got the balance of law and chaos in a given world comes when law and chaos have the same usage die, and as something happens, so say the characters go up against a hero of chaos and manage to defeat his schemes and everything else, then that triggers a usage die roll on behalf of chaos, and if chaos fails that roll, if its die is usage die is downgraded, then you end up with law having a higher usage die than chaos, and so law will be more manifest within the world than chaos, and so things will go until eventually one or the other takes over, and bad things happen when one of them achieves dominance. So really don't, anyone that went down the line, and this was a common mistake back in the days when Dungeons and Dragons did only have the three alignments of law, neutrality and chaos, there was a very much a misstep where people would look at chaos as being evil and law as being good, and I don't think that was helped very much by the way that the rules and adventures and so on were portrayed, because generally speaking it was the evil guys that you were up against that were being portrayed as chaotic. But that's not the case, and it's not the case in this book, and it wasn't the case back in D&D. And in fact, some of the D&D books back in the day specifically said law and chaos are not equatable to good and evil. It's basically chaos represents change and the forces of change and mutability and a world that is completely ruled by chaos finds it very difficult to hold fixed form. Things like will appear from nowhere, and traits that will animals will take on different traits at a seemingly random whim and everything else. The ground will appear to flow like a multicoloured river, and read Stormbringer, the novel, and you'll get an idea of a world increasingly ruled by chaos. A world ruled by law is just oppressive, and it's the opposite. So it's the opposite of this chaotic mutability. It is a stagnant world where progress isn't being made, where people are being or where an oppressive society can exist more, where stagnation, a lack of change, and so on. So neither extremes are. You don't want to live in a world that's dominated by law, and you don't want to live in a world that's dominated by chaos, because neither extremes is particularly good for anyone in there. However, if you're a champion of one or the other, then you may want to try and bring about the dominance of one or the other. But it's interesting to note that in the Elric books, Elric starts off as a champion of chaos and then gradually realises that that's a daft idea. So we have all of these tables, and there's quite... well, this is just a description of all. There's quite a few little bits of pieces of... we won't get into that in a second. Quite a few of tables where you've got inspirational stuff. So just roll a few dice, pick up the results of the table, and then that'll give you the background theme for your world. And then all you really need to do is get a bit of paper, scribble out a map on it, and then just figure out which particular nations follow which particular theme, and have it out. Like I said, create the world, a few dice rolls to give you some general themes for it. Throw the players into the conflict, between this cosmic conflict that they will gradually be able to grow in part of. It will flow a bit like the Elric novels, where at the start the world is relatively stable and people know their place in it, and even the Melnibonéans have their particular place in the world, and then gradually throughout the course of the novels things get more and more cosmically aligned. The Lords of Law and the Lords of Chaos take more of an direct interest in the world, until we eventually get to the last novels, where the conflict is open and the world goes to hell in a handbasket. So this is kind of what you're doing here. So you've got generating the antagonist. Is the antagonist law or chaos? The people that are serving law and the people that are serving chaos look like? What are the politics? You've got the political situation of a particular nation, and the attitude towards law and chaos of a location or a nation or whatever. And then you say, right, so on top of the struggle between law and chaos, the world may suffer from calamities based on what's going on. So you can create some natural disasters and political events that begin to get into the mix about what's happening in the world around them as it descends and falls to its end, or progresses to its end. And these are some sort of examples. It generates. There are some. So here you go. What it says here is like you create a map and then throw onto the map the Forbidden City, the Mercenary Bands, Amber Enclave, Golden Archipelago, Northern Reigns, and so on. And then it describes those particular regions. But if you wanted a completely bespoke world, you could do all of these things yourselves, or recreate these little tables about this is what's going on with these particular things. You don't have to follow their example. However, all of this is here if you wanted to get a world up and running really quickly that falls within the themes that the game is putting forward. And then you've got this thing about it says, many fantasy settings are stuck in the status quo. Rulers can be killed, but new ones will take their place. The world is meant to be saved, or at least preserved. This shouldn't be the case in a Black Sword hack campaign. Kingdoms and empires will disappear, and the world itself is not safe. The setting at the beginning and at the end of a campaign shouldn't be the same. Whether the characters are agents of that change is for the players to decide. So this is the whole idea. Create a world, watch it burn. Similar for putting cities together. Similar for this is an inspiring events that you can sort of go through, adventure seeds, and then we get into an example adventure. And the example adventures are more about story and flow and describing situations rather than actually than anything scripted. They're certainly not railroad type ideas. Very short, as you see, a whole adventure in 4 pages, 3 pages. And then an example city, and then some appendices that go through some advice on putting the game together and running it. These are quite nice, and this is an element that people could read for any game if they wanted the sort of the themes of the general sort of thematic view of the Black Sword hack from the authors that wrote the sort of fiction that the general theme of the Black Sword hack falls into. What it does is it adds quotes from those particular authors. So there's Howard, Moorcock, Lieber, Saberhagen, Abercrombie and Paul Anderson, and then gives you little bits of snippets of advice, so following the quote. So for example, you've got Stormbringer's famous quote from Moorcock: "Farewell, friend, I was 1,000 times more evil than thou." That's the quote. And then it says, "There will always be things way more malevolent and powerful than the characters." Which, that's good advice for any role-playing game in fantasy, really. And then you've got Appendix 3, which is running a Black Sword hack as a solo. Black Sword hack as a solo game. Bibliography, and your favourite sword and sorcery book is a plot generator, which is quite good. This little bit of snippet is again a useful tool for running in with any game. Find a novel or short story you like, open it up, point to some words, use those words as inspiration to go and put your game together. I won't repeat it verbatim. Get the book; it's not very expensive. The Dark Gods Oracle is if you need some advice on everything else, then sort of a question arises within the campaign and you need to try and get the answers for it. You've got a few rolls. This is quite nice. Start it off by going, alright, the answer to that particular thing is hell no, no but, yes but, yes, hell yes. So you can start from that, and then from there you can generate again inspirational seeds for what that answer means, so that you can use that as inspiration to drive the story, the campaign, whatever forwards. Cosmic usage dies. This is where we get law and chaos. Law and chaos having cosmic usage die, and at the end of an adventure, you get to roll the usage die, either with advantage or disadvantage, in order to see what happens. Then you've got this an optional rule, cosmic momentum. When your side's cosmic die increases, your doom die is stepped up as well for the duration of the next adventure. And for characters aligned with balance, this happens when both cosmic dice, the law and chaos ones, are the same. Balance or neutrality doesn't get its own cosmic usage die. And that's what I was saying earlier about the general theme of the world is has this law and chaos have a usage die that determines where the balance is between them at the moment. Friendly NPCs in combat, again, that's not a bad thing to go through. It's about what they do and describe them. So the Black Sword hack doesn't really let you use heroes, allies in combat, but you can of course put them at like a player character and have someone roll for them. But this can be used so with NPCs fighting on the character side, they might be wounded, they might be hit, they might actually successfully attack, but it's a way of dealing with that. I think I saw a question on a forum about if there's a whole ton of characters involved in things, how do you go and do that? And if you got in Dungeons and Dragons, because the combat rules for Dungeons and Dragons are quite slow and involved, so how would you manage that? And just using those rules in that, where the focus can remain with the player characters, so you deal with the player characters as the proper focus of the story and the game. So you do handle their immediate combats as per, and all the rest and what's going on around them. You could use these simple rules. It doesn't really matter. Then there's a description of a world by Evelyn Morrow, who submitted a world based on the first edition of Black Sword Hack. Just an example of a world, and then some impossible creatures, some strange planes, some names by origin. This is by real world origin, and then character sheet. That's it. That is a character sheet. That's all you need. And that's it. That's the whole game in a nutshell. I'm actually really excited about giving this a go. I like the Black Sword Hack rules. I think of many of the OSR games, it is one of those that is it doesn't try to go and emulate. It's not another Osric or Swords and Wizardry, where it's actually trying to be a retro clone, or trying to go and say, okay, this is D&D, but we've added a load of other stuff in it to either modernise it or to house rule some of the things that the authors felt were not right in the original editions of those games. It actually tries to bring something new to the table of essentially this sort of old school role-playing type theme, rules light, where it's the Dungeon Master is more proper refereeing instead of the arbiter of all things rules lawyer. And the Black Sword Hack I think is a brilliant little distillation in a specific theme version of the Black Hack. If anything, I'm liking this rendition of the Black Hack more than I'm actually liking the Black Hack itself. I especially like this origin and background process. For me, despite the rules are very much distilled down to the simplest common denominator, but it's very much reminiscent of RuneQuest, where you've got the civilization level, barbarian or nomad or primitive, whatever, of your character, and then you've got the professional on top of that. This is very similar to that. You've got your origin, and then you've got your background. So yeah, I really like this. Lovely book, lovely feeling hardback book. Some really nice art in there. Really evocative, fits with the theme of it, and yeah, as a Moorcock fan, it's a theme that I really like. So the Black Sword Hack Ultimate Chaos Edition by the Merry Mushmen, and I will put relevant links in the description to it. And that will do it for this one. Hopefully just a short one that gives you a feel for the game, and hopefully inspires you to go and give it a look. So until the next one, farewell.